Yo guys, how's everybody doing? Wanted to make another video tonight. I want to congratulate a couple of guys out there on YouTube, like the Entertainer, my guy Jet Central, putting in that draft work. Might even make a Johnny Manziel little film review, and it isn't going to be too hard because the dude was on the field for like 5 minutes. I didn't watch the game. I was watching a lot of the tournament. But, the thing is with Johnny is that, I'm happy Johnny's playing football again. It's exciting. It's going to make the AAF really tolerable after the season. You know what I mean? After a March Madness. But I wanted to make this video about March Madness, and I wanted to make this video about maybe 5 minutes, maybe 5-10 minutes on March Madness. So, this is what happened with the tournament this weekend. So, first game, let's try to go through all the dang games. So the first game that really took place in the March Madness was, the first window, and I'm just going off the top of my head with this stuff. Hold on one second. So the first game of the tournament we had, we didn't have Vermont, but we had, Minnesota, Louisville. Murray State was the only good game of the opening weekend. Murray State beating Marquette, but that was a blowout. The Auburn-New Mexico State game, if New Mexico hit a buzzer beater, it might have been a classic. But I like Auburn and Bruce Pearl anyway. And just during the first couple of games, actually Bradley, Michigan State, we had some really good success in the first window. Bradley, Michigan State, it was a very promising opening to the tournament. Very promising opening to the tournament in March, I'll tell you that. Yeah, that sounds a little bit better. It was a very promising, start. It was a promising start to the tournament. So, but then, as we got towards the nightcap, we had Villanova, St. Mary's, and that game was just a little bit dry. It was boring. The Kentucky game and Gonzaga were not really contests. Seton Hall and Wofford was a treat. I loved watching Fletcher and Nathan Hoover win. So that was great, to see Wofford shine on Thursday night and the nightcap on CBS down in Jacksonville. And then the final game of Thursday night was Baylor and Syracuse. And that game was a good little surprise, very competitive game. Old Dominion and Purdue was not really that competitive on Thursday night. It just was not. So overall on Thursday, we did not have any tremendous games. We did not have any really big upsets. All the 14s were not very competitive or close. All the threes were not competitive, I believe. Who did we have on I'll just take the headphones off. Who do we have Thursday night? We had Old Dominion. That Purdue game was a terrible game. And there was a lot of games that were just really, really dry on Thursday slate, and all the ones in Kentucky, just really poor games. But then we go to Friday. We have Tennessee, Colgate. The middle of Friday was very good. That was probably the best part of the tournament because we had Buffalo, Arizona State, which was very entertaining. UC Irvine finally beating Kansas State. We had Colgate. That was the best window. That's when we had a little bit of friction. That's when we had a little bit of magic, a little bit of March Madness. When Colgate was coming back on Tennessee. Like if Colgate beat Tennessee, that would have been the bracket buster that we needed to get this tournament jump started. But Tennessee was able to pull it out. But Gardner-Webb, like them beating Virginia, that's when we really started to have some madness. I mean, Cincinnati, Iowa, both of Iowa's games, now that you think about it, both of Iowa's games were absolute treats. Friday night was, other than Liberty winning, there were some bad games in the middle of Friday. I mean, that Utah State was terrible. Oregon was bad. the middle of Friday, I mean, I know Duke and North Dakota State. So, Friday night we did have Iowa State and Ohio State. I wanted a buzzer beater from Iowa State to tie it up, but that wasn't bad. VCU, UCF. So the nightcap was not awful, but we also didn't get a lot of excitement. And then Saturday, you're thinking about Murray State. You're thinking about some of these games. And we start off Saturday. We get a nice LSU and Maryland game, so we're thinking we're going to have a hell of a day. Then we get Wofford and Kentucky, which is an absolute treat. But then Murray State and Florida State absolutely sucked for us. The whole rest of Saturday night, we've never had a worse stretch of Saturday games I can ever remember. I mean, we went from blowout to blowout, just shit on top of shit on top of shit on top of shit. We had... In the Villanova didn't show up. Terrible defense. Carson Edwards goes off. We're in for just a nightmare. Baylor and Gonzaga. Baylor wasn't in that game for a second. It was miserable basketball. I mean, Kansas is a terrible team. Auburn killed them. I mean, the Villanova-Purdue game, there were just massacres all over that floor on Saturday night. I'm sure I'm missing some other just dog crap games, but Saturday night was just dreadful, and that's usually a good window for the NCAA tournament, but there were no upsets on Saturday. And then Sunday we get into the tournament. So Sunday this is today. We start out with a great comeback by Iowa. Good game versus Tennessee. Glad Tennessee moves on, but a really close game. Then in the afternoon stretch, we get I forgot about Florida and Michigan. That wasn't a good game on Saturday. So had Tennessee. I'm forgetting an afternoon game that I just tuned out. Forgetting an afternoon game. Oh, North Carolina, Washington. Didn't watch. Really bad game. The UCF game, if UCF would have won. But then Buffalo. What a terrible effort. Buffalo and Texas Tech. Like Murray State and Buffalo. These were supposed to be two really good teams. These were teams like Buffalo played. Buffalo, Villanova, and Murray State. For those games to be all 20-point games, huge, massive disappointment was that Texas Tech game. And in the end of the Duke game, it was an absolute classic with UCF. So I can't get mad. If that tip-in would have gone in, it would have been an absolute legendary play. I wish Dawkins got back and beat Duke, but the basketball gods weren't favorable. That alley-oop needed to be completed. Taco Fall fouling out was so predictable. I thought that Coach Dawkins should have kept Taco in the majority of the first half. He got a little too tentative there, but it was really well coached. It was by far the best game of the tournament. It's a game you'll absolutely remember, even if you're not a Central Florida fan. It was heartbreaking, but an absolute treat. But then the nightcap, I mean, we just had awful on top of awful. Virginia was terrible. Virginia, Oklahoma. Houston was unwatchable versus Ohio State. Didn't even watch that game. But the Buffalo and Texas Tech game, that game was a massive, massive disappointment by Buffalo. The fact that they got outscored 35-0, the fact that Nova was down 30, the fact that Auburn was up 20. The problem is with college basketball, and I'm getting to the root of my video, is that teams shoot way too many threes. The three-point line is too small, and 30 seconds is ruining basketball for the underdogs. I mean, there's no Cinderellas in this tournament. I mean, the tournament is supposed to churn out results that are crazy. We're supposed to see madness. We're not supposed to see chalk. And I know that these games might be really competitive next week, but the opening round of March Madness is supposed to be chaos. It's supposed to be buzzer beaters and epic overtime games and really close games and guys making mistakes and guys hitting crazy shots. And the games were too spread out. Like the fact that the format of college basketball is layered so that you have one game end ending and then like in 15 minutes the other game ends. I think games should be more stacked up. I don't think that the game should start at 12:40. I would move the games till about 3 o'clock and go really deep into the night, especially on the West Coast. I would stagger the games in the afternoon. I would start putting a lot of these games. On similar tip times. I hate the ticker in the upper right box of March Madness, because sometimes when you're looking at the monitor and it's showing the scores and you're behind, it really screws with you. But also the 3-point line, if we move it back to the FIBA line, the fact that it's a 30-second shot clock makes it more interesting because, well, teams get more possessions, but that also leads to chalk, because then the Cinderella teams like Butler, they would hold on to the ball for 35 seconds of the shot clock, and they would hold and hold and hold and hold and hold so that the possessions would get limited. And when you limit possessions, you have a chance to win basketball games. So that's the problem, is that the cream's going to rise to the top when you limit possessions. Just like in the NBA, a 24-second shot clock, you're going to get exposed. So a lot of these underdog teams, too, they shoot a lot of threes, they get up and down, they win their conference tournaments, but the problem with them is that they're losing how to play defense. And I think that a lot of the basketball product, when you look at Kansas, when you look at some of these teams, the AAU and Steph Curry, everybody shoots threes, so there's no mid-range game anymore for anybody really in college basketball. If analytics, it's either a dunk or a three, and there's almost an overusage of three-point shots. Passing is not as good as it used to be, but defense, team defense is really, really lacking. And I know that these guys are maybe getting better at shooting. I think that offense is getting a lot better. But the fact is, we're seeing during our game of college basketball, we're seeing teams just put on these huge warrior-like runs. And that's why if the NBA was like a FIBA line, if we can move the college three-pointer back, we can maybe start valuing teams that don't shoot the three-point shot, like, for example, Texas Tech, like now the fact that the three-point line is so short, really good shooting teams like Wofford, their differentials with teams like Texas Tech are random good or teams that can't shoot at all. The fact that the three-point line is so short, it actually is a deterrent for the Cinderellas, because now even the heavyweights that just have more size, even the heavyweights can shoot the three-point shot now that it's such a short distance. Also, Villanova kind of broke the camel's back of the tournament, because now you're seeing the favorites just recruit guards like Villanova, and the big man's becoming absolutely obsolete in college basketball. So now I have to admit, I have to give credit to the Power 5 conferences. Now that they have elite guards, they're able to match up really, really well with Cinderella teams, because guard play has never been better before. And now big men are shooting threes and everybody's all stretched out, and it's all just a finesse game, and there's not a lot of bullying inside. There's not a lot of bullying. It's all up and down. It's all like North Carolina. Last year Virginia lost because Virginia's style, Virginia lets teams stay close when you play long possessions and you take your time on offense, then you're going to let a bad team kind of stick around. Where with North Carolina, Iona got out all their shots. Iona hit everything, but North Carolina's going to give so many possessions that eventually Iona's going to give out. And that's why North Carolina never really loses in the first couple rounds of the tournament. And that's why a defensive team like a Virginia, they're going to squeak by in their rounds. So it was a terrible, terrible opening weekend because, unfortunately, like in life, when you have high expectations for something, like say it could be any walk of life. Like you go out to a club, you're dressing all nice, you expect to try to get some girls, you don't get any girls. You go to a golf course, your golf game is really coming great. Like you go to a range and you're absolutely destroying the golf ball, you're hitting it, you're drawing it, you got it all going on. And then you get to the golf course and it's like then you fail, and you fail badly. This March Madness, to me, I crave March Madness. I crave the first couple days of the tournament, and the fact that there were so many blowouts, it was just nauseating to watch. Like, the basketball that I was watching was not compelling at all. It was almost a waste of time. And that's sad, and I worry, I fear that in this world of this 30-second shot clock and in this AAU guard-oriented world, I'm scared that the heavyweights of college basketball are so much better equipped to handle the Cinderellas that we'll never get Cinderellas again. And I know in 2009 that all the top 12 seeds, every 1 through 3 seed made the Sweet 16, and we got all chalk, we got all number 1 seeds. But the fact is, when you look at this tournament, Oregon as a 12 seed had to beat UC Irvine. They're the only 12 seed left in this tournament. And also, we have every single number 1 seed is alive. Every 2 seed, every 3 seed, and then the 4 seeds. Virginia Tech is going, and also let me think about the other 4 that is going. I know Virginia Tech is going, and they're playing in the East. In the West, we have Houston, Kentucky, North Carolina. Well, Auburn won in the Midwest. In the West, we have Florida State, and Florida State wasn't even challenged. And then we have Oregon. So basically, we have Auburn. Out of the 16 teams, 15 of them are complete chalk. I mean, that Auburn-Kansas game, that's a 5 versus a 4. And then Oregon, they beat Wisconsin. They're a Power 5 school that won the Pac-12. Oregon is a usual occurrence. We have no Cinderellas left. I mean, if you count the American Conference in Houston, we have all Power 5s. We have no Cinderellas this year in March Madness. And with the shortened three-point line, with 30 seconds of shot clock, it allows the better teams to win the games, and that's not always better because parity is needed in college basketball. That's what I love about the tournament. I love the Cinderella. I love teams like Loyola. I love teams like George Mason that go on the legendary runs, like Butler, Wichita State, and Creighton before they got big to the, before they got too big for their breeches or whatever that saying is. I love the underdogs. I love seeing Butler and VCU make a Final Four together. That was the coolest thing, seeing Shaka versus Brad Stevens in the Final Four. Porter Moser last year. Even UAB, Chris Beard and Arkansas Little Rock hitting a 3-pointer to tie Purdue and beat Purdue. There are so many legendary games that you look back on, when you look back at March Madness. The Norfolk State over Missouri, Lehigh over Duke, all on Friday night. C.J. McCollum and Lehigh. That was such an amazing upset. I know UMBC was a team that was, a very popular team. Stephen F. Austin would make tons of noise and would come really close, to winning a lot of these games. We have Buffalo last year, but Buffalo, kind of phased out. But there's teams like North Dakota State that win. There's teams from the Summit League that have won before. There's been teams in the Horizon League that have won games before. There's been small schools that have won games. Harvard was a school that would win these tournament games. And, even VCU with Eric Maynor, when they beat Duke, that was so special. There's special games in March. There are special teams, special games, incredible upsets, and shock. And there was no shock or pop or anything this weekend. It was incredibly disappointing. And you could point. And now the problem with everything in college basketball is that nobody's going to insult the tournament. Nobody's going to look to help out the little guy. And I'm worried that these officials in college basketball. I'm worried because of money they sacrifice everything. Like, I'm worried that Duke, foul, first of all, in that Zion play, that was an offensive foul. He pushed a guy out of the way, so that should have been called. And then on the other side of the free throw that Duke was able to get R.J. Barrett to get an offensive rebound putback, you had the guy, he has a long last name for Duke. He's another big guy, and he hooked the UCF guy in the lane, and nothing was called because they want – the problem is, the Verizon Center, all of Maryland, all of Washington, D.C. wanted Duke to see Zion, and so that ticket now is going to be incredibly valuable. So there's so much money. And also for Duke, for RJ, Cam, and Zion now, and Trey Jones, the fact now that Zion is going to be playing next weekend, the ratings for Turner are going to be so high. And also the attendance, the fact that Duke and Michigan State, these high-profile schools, you're going to have really good attendance. You're going to have a lot of wealthy alumni. The bigger the school, the wealthier the alumni base, the more money that it's going to generate, the more money that venue is going to get. When you get Kentucky in that venue, that ticket will increase by about $300. And with flights and tickets and everything, the tournament, with all the advertising dollars that are out there, these small schools, when you look at Mark Emmert and what the NCAA is trying to do, to have the Cinderella win, the NCAA doesn't win. They lose out on money. But really, I love the Cinderellas. I love March Madness. I love the little guy. That's inspiring, that when Butler lost to Connecticut, that was so disappointing. After that first half, they had a lead. I wanted to see Butler win the whole damn thing. I wanted to see Matt Howard become a champion, and it never happened. And the fact that Taco Fall is never going to play like another college basketball game, and those kids from UCF can't win. The fact that those Buffalo seniors all go out on such a terrible note. It really is emotional when you have a group of seniors, and that's why with pro sports in the NBA, when you lose a 7-game series, sure, the ref can rig the game to try to, get you some more NBA playoff series. Sure, it happens, but these guys are still making millions, and they'll still come back until they can't play anymore. In college basketball, after the 4 years, there's a finality moment to it. And that's is what makes it so emotional. And, when your team wins in March Madness, if you ever go to a small school and you ever get that upset, like a Lehigh over Duke, and you go to Lehigh, that's a moment that you can't take for granted, is winning these games. For Loyola last year, for example, when Loyola made that run, I was watching Ben Richardson and Clayton Custer and Porter Moser and Marcus Towns and Ingram and all of those guys. And, of course, the big man Cam Crutwig was only a freshman at that time. But Marcus Towns is tremendous. And I was watching that team, and that team was a great Missouri Valley basketball team. But the nation would have never known about Sister Jean and anything if Ingram, the lefty, didn't hit that shot versus Miami. If Clayton Custer didn't get one of the luckiest shooting rolls of all time, Tennessee would have beaten Loyola, and Loyola and Porter Moser and that entire school would have never had the run to the Final Four that it did. The fact that Loyola made a Final Four is one of the most remarkable stories of my lifetime. The fact that Nevada, they beat Nevada on a 3-point shot to continue their run, and then against Kansas State, Ben Richardson has 23 points. The fact that Clayton Custer went to Iowa State, and then he rejoins his friend. He transfers from Iowa State and rejoins his buddy, his childhood friend Ben Richardson, in Chicago after they grew up in Kansas City together. That's just so emotional to me, and to see Sister Jean and have that magical run, like nobody can take that away. For VCU and Shaka, like nobody can take away that run. For all the Brad Stevens games, nobody can take it away. And it's so hard to win, especially when the refs are stacked against you, especially now with this 30-second shot clock, when guards are better at shooting threes than ever before. And with AAU basketball, it's hard to find a group of unselfish guys that all play together. And it's hard to be a center in college basketball and get out to the three-point shooters because everybody has stretch fives now. So the game is just so fast. It's so chaotic. A lot of college basketball games are played like the Ball family plays high school games in Chino Hills. I mean, that Murray State Florida State game, there was no structure or order to that game. It was all runouts. It wasn't half court basketball, and it's fun for a little bit, but literally every game is just like Nova. Everybody's copying Nova now, and Nova's not going to have that advantage. And also the conference tournament, teams are just laying down in the conference tournament. Teams are laying down towards the end of the year because Jay Wright was able to get his guys to peak at the right moment. So, I mean, that's just kind of my feelings on, this college basketball weekend. I know it was a long video, but for you guys who love college basketball, it was a problematic time. I don't like to be negative. I make a lot of negative videos a lot sometimes. So, but anyhow, guys, thanks so much for sticking with, and I hope you enjoyed some of the video.